QR codes, you can watch our video. My name is Chelsea. I am a nursing student here at Nashville State Community College, and today I would like to talk to you a little bit about nutrition and healthy eating and how to prevent type 2 diabetes. This is a particularly important topic for us in the United States right now because diabetes is rising to endemic proportions. Some recent rates that I've heard are that 1 in 4 people that actually have diabetes don't even know that they have it. So the more information that you have on this topic, the better. I'll go ahead and start by defining type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic condition that affects the way that your body processes blood sugar, which is known as glucose. With type 2 diabetes, the body either doesn't produce enough insulin or it resists it. And insulin resistance causes blood sugar and insulin levels to stay high for a long time after eating. And over time, the heavy demands made on the insulin-making cells in the pancreas wears them out, and insulin production eventually stops. When insulin production stops, that's when you start having to take insulin through injections, or you may be taking some oral pills, some anti-diabetic drugs. So I'll talk to you a little bit more in depth on insulin resistance, and we have this really nice graphic here. So if you want to follow along with the graphic, I'm going to start up here with this gentleman eating, it looks like a hamburger and french fries and a soda. So there's going to be a lot of carbohydrates in a diet like this, and particularly simple carbohydrates, which are ones that don't have a lot of fiber to slow down your digestion of them. That's going to spike your blood glucose, and over time, if you have high blood glucose, your pancreas, which produces the insulin in your body, is going to be stressed out. Your body needs the insulin for your cells, for the body cells that use glucose, to actually let the glucose in so they can utilize them for energy or store them later for energy. When your pancreas is stressed out, your blood glucose is high, you're going to end up with cells that become less and less responsive to the high levels of insulin. That is, in essence, insulin resistance. What will happen is that your glucose is high, your insulin is high, but your cells are pretty much starving. They're not getting any of that energy. When you keep your blood glucose high, then you start having damage to your arteries and your nerves. This happens due to plaques that develop on your arteries. The same thing will happen with your nerves, and you're going to have less oxygen, less nutrient flow to your tissues, and you're going to start to see things like heart and blood vessel damage, neuropathy in the limbs, which is going to be tingling. That can lead to you having wounds, particularly on your feet, that may not heal over time because you're not getting those nutrients to heal, and you're also not feeling it when you have an injury. It'll also lead to kidney damage, to eye damage. You can lose your sight if you're a diabetic and it's uncontrolled, hearing impairment, and even dementia. What will happen also with this high glucose, what you may start to see, some of the biggest signs are going to be increased hunger, right? We talked about how even though your blood sugar is really high, your cells aren't getting that energy. So you're going to be constantly hungry. You're going to be eating a lot. The body will try to rid any substance in itself that is going to be potentially harmful. So when your blood glucose is very high and it's not being utilized in the cell, one of the ways that your body gets rid of it is through your kidneys and through your urine. So that'll be another symptom. You're going to be going to the bathroom a lot, and because you're losing so much water, you're also going to be thirsty. So those 3 things, being very hungry and eating a lot, urinating frequently, and being very thirsty are some of the first signs that you will see. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the bulk of this presentation right now. We're going to talk about healthy eating to prevent diabetes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, an explanation of simple versus complex carbohydrates, and how that plays into something called the Glycemic Index, which is used for people that have diabetes and for people that are at risk for developing diabetes. So simple versus complex carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are going to be things like white flour or white potatoes. They're generally devoid of a large amount of fiber or minerals. Your body can break them down very quickly, and you're going to have a sharp, fast spike in blood sugar and insulin. Compared to complex carbohydrates, which you can think about things like whole grains, right? Brown rice. Those have those vitamins, minerals, and especially important, that fiber, which is going to slow the digestion down, going to make your stomach empty the food into your small intestine where it starts to absorb all of those nutrients much slower than a simple carbohydrate. And so you're going to have a slower, more gradual rise in your blood sugar. So using that information to talk about the glycemic index, what the glycemic index is it ranks carbohydrates on a scale from 0 to 100 based on how quickly and how much they raise your blood sugar levels after eating. So if you are at risk for developing diabetes, or if you are a diabetic, you're going to want to become familiar with the glycemic index so you can choose lower glycemic index foods over time. Foods with high glycemic index, like white bread, are rapidly digested and they cause substantial fluctuations in blood sugar. Foods with a low glycemic index, like whole oats, are digested much more slowly, and once again, you're going to have a more gradual rise in blood sugar. Okay, so now that you have that basic information, I'm going to give you 6 different points. 6 tips that you can follow to hopefully change your diet a little bit and prevent type 2 diabetes. The first is weight loss. So carrying excess weight is the single most important risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Being overweight increases the chances of developing type 2 diabetes by 7 times, and being obese, which is having a body mass index of 30 or over, actually puts you at a 20 to 40 times greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So if you're overweight, just by losing 7 to 10% of your current body weight can cut your risk by 50%. That's really substantial. Number 2, choosing whole grains and whole grain products over refined processed carbohydrates. We went over that a little bit when I gave you the definition of simple versus complex carbs and with the glycemic index. This is really just as simple as choosing whole grain products like a whole grain bread over a white bread. Number 3, skip sugary drinks. I know that a lot of sodas or energy drinks, particularly for all the students at Nashville State, are sometimes useful to gain energy, but they really don't do your body very good. With that said, I know I talked about sodas and energy drinks, but even if you're drinking juice, 100% juice, just like with the whole grains that we're talking about, fruit juice doesn't have any fiber in it. So even though you're receiving some vitamins and minerals, you're still going to get a really sharp, quick rise in your blood sugar. So instead of doing juice, try to make a smoothie instead. Fresh fruits are great. You definitely want the fruits in your diet, but you want to have more fiber to help slow your digestion down to create a more gradual rise in your blood sugar. You could even choose things, if you have to have the juice, choosing things like green juices that have cucumber, kale, celery, with maybe a little bit of apple or some lemon juice. That's going to be a really good choice too. And for all you coffee drinkers, if you need some energy, there is evidence right now that the magnesium that is in coffee can help prevent type 2 diabetes because it improves the effectiveness of insulin. Number 4 is choosing healthy fats. The fats play into this disease process with inflammation in your body. So you're going to want to choose healthy fats, and especially omega-3s whenever you can, because those are going to limit inflammation in your body. They're going to prevent your body also from developing plaques in your arteries, which can lead to more significant complications with diabetes. So by adding good sources of fats, you can lengthen the amount of time that your stomach takes to deliver food into your small intestine. This goes right back to what we were talking about with the carbohydrates, both in whole grains and by choosing smoothies over juice. When you add fat into your stomach, it's going to take a little bit longer for your stomach to start to break some of that down, and it's going to release it more slowly into your small intestine. As I mentioned before, your small intestine is what processes a lot of that food and absorbs those nutrients, so you're going to have a slower rise in blood glucose. When your body slows down digestion, blood sugar rises more slowly and evenly. And you should choose unsaturated fats over saturated fats, and especially trans fats. So I'll give you a couple pointers on this. Unsaturated fats are mostly going to come from plants and nuts. You can also see I have some salmon here, things like omega-3s, which I talked about, which are really good for fighting inflammation. That is a animal source of an unsaturated fat. But for the most part, you see avocados, nuts, things like extra virgin olive oil, those are really, really good fats. Saturated fats are going to be bacon fat, butter, not so great for you in high amounts. The one fat that you really want to stay away from is trans fat. And a trans fat starts out as an unsaturated fat, but then it's chemically processed under high pressure, and it actually changes the molecular structure, and it makes it very similar to plastic. So just try not to put it in your body. It can create a lot of inflammation, as we talked about before. That is a risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes. The thing about trans fats, you may think like, I don't eat that. Unfortunately, they're in a lot of the foods that we end up liking. A lot of processed foods that you buy at the grocery stores, cakes that are coming from some factory from you don't know where, your fast food burgers, French fries, frozen pizzas, and a lot of times they're hidden trans fats because our government doesn't say if it's under half of a gram per serving. They don't even have to list it on their nutrition label. So just be wary, don't eat a lot of processed foods, and you're probably going to be okay with that. The fifth thing is limiting red meat and avoiding processed meat. You want to choose beans, nuts, whole grains, poultry, or fish instead. Biggest reason for this, once again, we're talking about fiber. So in beans and in nuts, whole grains, all of those are going to have a lot of fiber, which is going to, once again, create a more gradual rise in your blood sugar. And also, a high iron content, we're starting to see like high iron in red meat can actually diminish insulin's effectiveness or the demands on the cells producing insulin. So you're going to want to choose things like beans over meat, or we have a picture here of some plant-based diet choices. There is current research that suggests that if you adopt a more plant-based diet, that could lower your risk of type 2 diabetes too. But it does matter what you eat. So choosing things like vegetables and whole grains over French fries and mac and cheese, that's going to be the best way to do a plant-based diet. And then if you need a pick-me-up in the afternoon, choosing nuts and dried fruit over a candy bar would be more appropriate as well. The last thing that the last tip we'll give you for the healthy eating is to limit your alcohol content. So moderate amounts of alcohol, up to a day for women and 2 drinks a day for men, which actually may be changing here in the next couple of years. There's some research that shows that maybe even 1 drink a day for men may be appropriate. Increases the efficiency of insulin at getting the glucose inside of the cells. And so some studies show that moderate alcohol consumption decreases your risk for type 2 diabetes. I will say though, if you don't already drink, you don't need to start. You can have the same benefits by exercising and eating. What about how this impacts us as a general population in the United States, and then also how it affects us as a student population in Nashville State. So as I mentioned before, some of the recent numbers are that as many as 1 in 4 people don't know that they have diabetes. One of the ways in which our group is relating this is to food insecurity and to low-income families. Around 13% of American households experience food insecurity. Some of the latest numbers. There are certain populations that are more affected than others. Those can be students, single parents, the elderly that are on fixed incomes, and those that are health impaired or have chronic conditions where they have a lot of money that's going out for their treatment, or they're not able to work as regularly. Food insecure populations are at risk for less diverse, lower quality diets related to micronutrient intake, iron deficiency, and a low intake of fruits and vegetables. And the reason for this is that when you are buying perishable foods, fresh fruits and vegetables and meats, I'm sure you've noticed at the grocery store, they're much more expensive than processed foods are. So with people that are on limited budgets, a lot of times they're choosing things like these frozen dinners, Bisquick instead of making things from scratch. And that's when you're going to start to have added sugars and added bad fats that are really going to affect your health. And the relevance to the Nashville state population is that we essentially have a higher percentage that fall within the low income bracket, right? So we don't have the time to work full time, many of us. We may have other responsibilities. I know there's a significant portion of Nashville State that are single parents. 33% of us receive Pell Grants. We receive federal money. To receive that, we have to display extraordinary financial need. That number in itself lets us know that there are people that are struggling even just to go to school. 40% are over the age of 24. That means that these people are likely to have spouses or children to support. As I mentioned, 64% of the student population here are female, and they may have kids, and 56% are part-time. These individuals may not have the time to shop or prepare nutritious food if they're trying to balance what likely is a full-time job that they're holding. And then the last part of our project are some community resources that we would like to provide to you. The first one I'm going to talk about is Nashville Food Project, and this is a really great local organization that's been around for several years that fights food insecurity in a number of ways. Their current numbers are that 1 in 7 Nashvillians don't have access to the food that they want and need. And some of the ways in which they are fighting food insecurity are through community gardens. So they have spaces where if you have an interest, you can come, and as a community, you'll have a small plot and you can learn to grow your own food. They also support recent immigrants that come from agricultural backgrounds so that they can continue how they made money in the country that they were coming from. They set them up with the means to do that and a space to then sell vegetables at the farmer's market. The National Food Project also does food recovery, which is really, really huge. We have a number here that in 2020, 98,351 pounds of food were recovered from the partners that they have. I know that here in Nashville with this organization, they're working with people like Porter Road Butcher, Costco, Whole Foods, and even in the Bells Bend corridor, which is a historical agricultural community in our area. So they're receiving the produce that doesn't sell at market or that's left over from their community-supported agriculture programs. They're taking that food and they are working with local nonprofits to provide meals to those in need. And they're working with people like the Martha O'Brien Center and 50 Forward. We also have WIC, which is a federal program, but we do have branches in each state. And WIC is designed to provide supplemental food assistance and nutrition education to low-income pregnant, postpartum, and breastfeeding women. As I mentioned before with NSCC students, personally, I know many single moms that have kids here, so we thought that this would be an appropriate resource for you guys. WIC has been proven to be effective in preventing and improving nutrition-related health problems, and it serves about 111,000 Tennesseans each year. So we have provided a link here to apply for WIC if you do need assistance, and if you meet the criteria, you can find out more information on their website there. And we also have listed a website for the Nashville Food Project if you want to see if the organization that you work with is eligible to work with them, or if maybe you want to volunteer. Thank you for taking the time to stop by.